All right, let's get started tonight. Brother Gilmore, open us up.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this night again to study your word and to spiritually draw closer to you. And bless Brother Stewart as he teaches. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, let's review. Tonight we're going to talk about the two witnesses. We've gotten up to Revelation 11 and the two witnesses. We're not going to get completely through that. That's going to be at least one more week, maybe 2 more weeks before we get completely through the two witnesses. So there's a lot of it in there that we want to talk about. Hopefully we'll be able to get through all the rest of that next week. But let's look at what we've already talked about so far. All right? Up to now, 6 of the 7 trumpets have sounded. We've got 6 of the 7 trumpets already done. And when we left off last week, a mighty angel has come down from heaven. And he is dressed in clouds. He has a rainbow over his head. And no, that does not mean that he's part of the alphabet community. Yeah, he's not woke. He's not one of the LGBTQ XYZ people. All right? But he is, remember, the rainbow was a sign of God's promise to us. He has a little book in his hand, and his right foot is on the sea, his left foot is on the land, which shows us that he has dominion over land and sea, okay? And he speaks with the roar of a lion, and when he speaks, there are 7 thunders utter their voices. John is about to write down what the 7 thunders uttered. But he hears a voice that says, "Don't write them down. I don't want you to write those down." So you can only imagine what those are going to be. We see what's happened so far, and now he's telling John, "Don't write down this, okay? This is a special treat for all of them." But we know that the mysteries of God are going to be finished at this time. Now, remember, a mystery is not something that is unknown. We often think that a mystery is just something that we don't know about. Mysteries are actually things that can be known, but they have to be revealed to you. Right? So, it's hard to know exactly what these mysteries are, but these mysteries will be revealed. Now, John, if you remember, was commanded to take the scroll from the angel and eat the scroll. So he does. He takes it. He eats the scroll. And when he eats it, he says it is sweet as honey in his mouth, but it is bitter in his stomach. That means that the Word of God is sweet in our mouth. It's sweet to us. Okay? But can also be very bitter because deep down, it convicts us. It shows us. It tells us what we're supposed to. See, the Bible is there for reproach, for instruction, for correction. Right? And the Bible tells us that's what it's for. And people tell it, well, you shouldn't use the Bible. You shouldn't do that to condemn me or do it. Why? It tells us to. That's what it's there for. It tells us that we're to use the Bible to correct people. You're wrong. We need to correct you. Here's what is right. Right? John's told that he must prophesy again to many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings. Now remember, John's on Patmos at this time. John has been exiled to Patmos. Patmos was an island where it's kind of a penal island, a penitentiary type of thing. And he's exiled to this island. But tradition has it, there's nothing that's really written down, it doesn't tell us in the Bible, but tradition has it that John, when he was later on in life, he was released from Patmos because he was basically paroled or pardoned. And he left Patmos and came back into the region, and he still preached and prophesied. If you remember, John's the only apostle that died peacefully of an old age. They tried to kill him once. Anybody remember how they tried to kill John? Yeah, they tried to throw him in boiling oil, and it didn't work. He was like, a spa day. So they said, okay, we can't kill you that way. We're going to send you to Patmos. You may not be dead, but you sure wish you were. So John again prophesies to many people, nations, tongues, and kings. All right, now we're going to get into Revelation chapter 11. Let's start with verse number 1 and 2. It says, there was given me a reed like unto a rod. And the angel stood, saying, rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall tread under foot 42 months. Now, the outer court, there was a court in the temple, was an outer court. It was called the court of the Gentiles. The Gentiles weren't allowed into the inner courts in Solomon's temple. Right? So, since they weren't allowed in the inner court, there was the outer court. But we're going to talk a little bit more about this in just a little while. Now, Ezekiel 40 to 43, there are some extended passages in there where the temple is actually measured. This temple that is being measured in Ezekiel is best understood as the temple of the millennial earth. In other words, this is the temple that is going to be there during the millennial reign of Christ. Right? This is not the temple that we're talking about here. This temple that we're talking about here, here, appears to be before the temple in Ezekiel. All right? So the temple will be rebuilt. That will be the third temple. The millennial temple will actually be the fourth temple. Make sense? Everybody looking at me like a deer in the headlights. Okay? All right. So the idea of measuring something in the Bible generally communicates that the person has ownership over that. It's protection. It's preservation of it. So that's what measuring the temple is about. When Habakkuk prophesied, he stood and measured the earth in Habakkuk 3:6. The idea was that the Lord owned the earth and he could do with it whatever he pleased, which he does. God owns the earth. He can do with it whatever he wants to. He can tear it up. He can do whatever he wants. Okay? When the temple is measured, it shows that God knows every single dimension of the temple and that God is in charge. He's in charge of it. Now, there's a lot of things that are going to happen in the temple. And there are going to be some times of great glory that's going to happen in this temple, but there's also going to be some great horror that's going to happen in this temple. And we'll see that as we go along. Regardless of the glory or the horror that happens in the temple, God is still in charge. All right? Now, the identity of the temple, it's an important matter of interpretation. As I've said before when we started this, and I've said throughout this entire class, and as we've been going through this, we know that there are as many different ideas about how to interpret that as there are commentators. A lot of people have different ideas as to what the temple is. But there are several times that Paul described the church as a temple. In Ephesians 2:19 to 21, Paul said, "Now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints in the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all building fitly framed together groweth unto an holy temple in the Lord. So the church is the temple. The foundation is the apostles and the prophets. Jesus is the cornerstone. And the church, or the temple, is built from us, the saints, the Christians, right? And we're a temple, all right? So Paul here is identifying the church as a temple. Peter described the church as a temple. 1 Peter 2 and 5. Ye also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. So Peter has described the church as a temple. So this is basically, they're metaphorically putting in these interpretations, the ones that are doing this type of interpretation, is metaphorically saying, or allegorically saying, that the temple that they're talking about here, that John is supposed to measure, is the church. It's not a physical temple, it's a church. Well, if it's the church, then why does it have to be measured? Okay? You can't measure the people. You can't put a physical measurement on them. If it is metaphorically speaking or allegorically speaking, then what's the significance of the courts and the altar? If he's saying to measure the temple and measure the worshipers, who are the worshipers? If the worshipers are actually the temple. Okay? So when you get down to it, there's just too much specific detail that's coming down here for this to be a generalized picture of the church. So more likely, it is evident that the temple is a physical temple, and it is physically here on earth. It has to be physically here on earth. It has to be a physical place. And it has to be because there has to be the fulfillment of what Daniel, Jesus, and Paul said regarding the abomination of desolation. Daniel said the Antichrist is going to break the covenant with the Jewish people. Now, we'll get into this later, but there's going to be a covenant between the Jewish people and the Antichrist and with the world. Okay? After 3.5 years, this covenant is going to break. They're going to be broken. And the way the covenant is going to be broken is because the Antichrist will defile the temple by setting something abominable there. He's going to do something abominable there. He's going to set something abominable there. If you want to look at that, it's in Daniel 9:27, 11:31, and 12:11. Jesus said to look for the abomination. Look for an abomination standing in the holy place. This, when he says, when you see this, and it's in Matthew 24, he says, when you see this, it's a pivotal sign that the season of God's wrath was upon the earth. Matthew 24:15 and 16, and 24:21. Paul, in 2 Thessalonians 2, 3, and 4, Paul said Antichrist would sit in the temple as God. He is going to come in, he's going to defile the temple by setting himself up as God in the temple. Okay? So, some people say that this abomination is actually going to be idolatrous worship established in the hearts of God's people, which is his temple. Okay? Again, these are other commentators that are saying this. There's a problem with that. Can anybody see the glaring problem with that? It's like, okay? God's people. How can they be called God's people and God's temple if they're worshiping Antichrist? Okay? So this is a real Jewish temple. It is the real Jewish temple on the Temple Mount is what this is going to be. Right? Now, the Jewish people, they're very interested in rebuilding the temple today. Right now, there is, if you go to Israel, and there are people that are there, and even in the United States, there are people there that are attempting to educate the public, and they're trying to raise awareness for a new temple. There are rabbinical students and students from people from the tribe of the priests that are being trained now for the priesthood. They're actually going to school and being trained for the priesthood. Now, the Orthodox Jews say Messiah is going to rebuild the temple. There's a little bit of a problem with that, because the man that they endorse or the man that they embrace as Messiah may in fact actually be Antichrist. So Antichrist is not going to be able to rebuild the temple. All right? John 5:49, Jesus says, I am come in my Father's name, and ye received me not. If another shall come in his own name, him ye will receive. So Jesus is saying that I come in the Father's name. I come as the Messiah, but you don't accept me as the Messiah. So there's going to be somebody else that's going to come in his name. Who's going to come in his name? Antichrist. Him you're going to receive. So he's going to come in his own name. He's not going to call himself Antichrist, but he is going to say, I am God. Okay? And he's going to be against everything that is godly. So we have to know. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's look at verse number 2. Revelation 11, verse 2. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall tread underfoot 42 months. Again, plenty of debate on this. Lots of debate on this. One of the contentions on this is that this is perhaps because the outer courts include the Islamic dome of the rock shrine, and that's why it's not included in there. Some people, there is some evidence that they have found, or some people have found stuff that tend to think that the Dome of the Rock is not actually on the official Temple Mount as it has been thought. We've long assumed that the Dome of the Rock stands on the site of the old temple, but now these people are saying that it doesn't actually stand on the site of the old temple, because in AD 70, when the Romans came in and destroyed the temple, they destroyed it so thoroughly that you can't even find the foundation of the temple. So you don't know where it is, where it actually was. Now, we know that it was in that area, but they're saying that the Dome of the Rock is probably on the outside of where the temple actually was. Now, y'all know the Wailing Wall is the western wall of the old Jerusalem. Yeah, the old city wall. Yeah. Now, y'all know what the Dome of the Rock is. Does anybody not know everybody know what the Dome of the Rock is? You don't know what the Dome of the Rock is? Okay, nobody knows what. I don't know what this is the Dome of the Rock, right? The Dome of the Rock was erected by Islam on the Temple Mount. It has significance for a couple of reasons. See, this is probably one of the most holy places in the world right here. It has significance for Jews, has significance for Christians, and it has significance for Islam. What they say this goes over a rock that was there. And what it is, and it's a huge building. You can see the people there. It's a huge building. It's said by the Jews, it is said to be the rock and the area in which Abraham brought Isaac to sacrifice. This is where he was going to sacrifice Isaac. Right? It's later where they built the temple itself. Islam says it's holy to Islam because they say it is where Muhammad, their prophet Muhammad, came from his night's journey. And what his night's journey was, not K-N-I-G-H-T-S, but nighttime journey. What that is there was, Muhammad was in Mecca, which is their holiest place, is in Mecca. There, their holy city is Mecca. He was brought from Mecca to this rock here. While he was there, he was taken to heaven. He talked with Moses. He talked with the other prophets. It's even said in the Quran that he spoke to Jesus while he was there. Okay? And then he came back. All right? He was taken up in a vision and sent back, and then he was sent back to Mecca. So to them, this is a holy place as well. So that's what the Dome of the Rock is. Right? Now, the reason that even though Israel, this is in Israel, it's in Jerusalem, which is part of Israeli territory since 1947. It's been part of Israeli territory. So the reason that nothing has happened on this is they made concessions to leave this. If they try to destroy the Dome of the Rock right now, this is like Islam's second holiest shrine outside of Mecca. If they try to do it, then they're going to have a major war in the Middle East. Right? Yeah, everybody around them is going to come after them. What is probably going to happen for the temple to be rebuilt, because there's going to be an agreement between Antichrist and the Jews. There's going to be a covenant that's made, which we talked about. It's going to last 42 months. When this happens, most likely what is going to happen, the way that I see it and the way that I interpret this, is that sometime with all of the trumpets sounding and all of these things happen, all of the stuff that's going on, the Dome of the Rock is going to be destroyed. God's going to destroy the Dome of the Rock, and it's going to be attributed to natural things. But the Dome of the Rock will be destroyed, leaving it open for the Jews to rebuild Solomon's temple upon this area. And they have everything set up. The Jews have everything set up to rebuild the temple. They've got stone quarries that are making the cutting the rocks, cutting the stones and everything to build the temple. They're replicating the dishes that are used in the altars. They have a red calf that's ready to be sacrificed right now, and they keep that red calf going, that line of the red calf going. It's all ready to be done. That's what's holding them up from doing it. Okay? So that has to be removed out of the way. Man's not going to remove it. God is. God's going to remove it out of the way. Okay? So it says that the holy city will be tread underfoot for 42 months. Well, 42 months just happens to be 3.5 years, which is the second half of the Great Tribulation. All right? And this will be the time that Antichrist actually pours out his fury on the people of Israel. this is the time when Antichrist is going to let his true colors be seen. See, up until this time, he's going to be this real nice guy that is up there, and it is, he's uniting the world. He's getting everything. Things are starting to smooth out. He's got covenants with all these nations and with Israel, and everything's going to be hunky-dory for a little while, for about 3.5 years. Then he's going to defile the temple. He's going to go in and set himself up as God. He will actually proclaim from the Holy of Holies that he is God. That is going to be the abomination of desolation. That is going to be the defiling of the temple. That is what breaks the covenant with Israel. And that's what starts the second half of the tribulation. Okay? All right. Getting into the two witnesses now. I had to lead you up to that point. All right. Revelation 11, 3 through 6. And I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days. How many days is that? 1,260 days, which just happens to be 3.5 years, yes. These are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before God of the earth. We're going to look at that. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must this manner be killed. These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and the power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. Okay? Pretty tough guys. All right? Now, there's two or more interesting, these are two of the more interesting characters in this unfolding drama of Revelation that we see. They're very interesting. The character of their ministry is a twofold. Okay? First of all, anybody care to guess what it is? First of all, it's what? Prophetic. It's a prophetic ministry. Right? Because they're there to prophesy to the people. The second is that it is a repentant ministry. Right? So they're going to be there and they're going to call people to repentance as well. Now it says that they are the two olive trees and two lampstands. Where does this come from? Okay. This is the continual empowering from the Holy Spirit that they get, and where we see this at is in Zechariah. It is the olive trees and the lampstands that were in Zechariah 4:2, chapter 4, verses 2 and 3, and chapter 4, verses 14. Now, if you'll remember those two witnesses that he was talking about at that time, those two witnesses had first applied to two people in Zechariah's day. Okay? I'm sure you probably don't remember who they were. Anybody happen to remember who they were? No? All right. Okay, yeah. Huh? Wasn't Zebediah. But it is, the other one was, Joshua. No. Joshua and Zerubbabel. So you're right, it started with a Z. Joshua and Zerubbabel. Now, if you'll remember when we went through this and we were going through this, I know it was a while back when we went through Zechariah, but as we were going through this and he saw the lampstands and the olive trees, the oil lamps were filled directly from the olive trees. So it had a continuous flow of olive oil for the lamps. Yes. Same one. Same guy. Yeah, same guy. He gets around, that Joshua, I tell you what. Okay. Now, here's the big question. The question of the day. If you can answer this question, who are the two witnesses? Okay. Enoch and Elijah. Okay. All right. Okay. You say Enoch and Elijah. Anybody else have any other ideas of who it might be? No? Let's look at, Now, let's look at some, again, this is one of those things to where you have as many commentators as you've got, or you've got as many opinions as you've got commentators, just about. So let's look at what some of the theories are on this. First of all, let's break this down. Let's look at what witness actually means. Let's look at the Greek word for witness. Well, in this case, the Greek word for witness is martusin. Martusin literally means witness, either an eyewitness or an ear witness, meaning somebody who has either seen or heard. In order to be a witness, you have to have either seen or heard what you're testifying to. When you go to court, yes. John and Daniel, okay. Well, we're going to look at that. We're going to look at that a little bit closer. We're going to see who they are. If you're going to be a witness to something, you have to have either seen it or heard about it. You can't go to court and sit down and the judge tells you to raise your hand and he swears at you. Swears you in. And then he goes, okay, tell me what you know. And you say, well, I heard that somebody told me this, and he's going to go, oh, wait a minute. Can't use that. That's hearsay testimony. Okay? Well, my neighbor told me that they heard somebody standing up. No, you can't do that. Okay? Huh? Me? Yeah. Now, if you go in and sit down and say, I heard somebody outside, I heard something outside, I heard a voice outside, and I know that it sounded like this person, you heard it. You're a witness to that. You can testify to that because you heard it yourself. Or you say, I looked out the window and I saw, John Doe running across the street carrying a gun when had blood all over him. Okay, you're a witness to that. You can actually testify to that. You can't testify if you say, or somebody told me, or I heard somebody say this. Okay? In order to be a witness, in order to be a martusin in Greek, in order to be one, you have to actually have seen it or heard it yourself, not somebody else telling you about it. So, that in mind, these witnesses have to have seen or heard what they're testifying to. Okay? We testify in churches. A lot of people testify in church, right? I want to tell you what happened. Let me tell you what God did for me. Okay? Hallelujah. Can I get an amen in the house? Okay, when you're testifying in church, okay, when you are witnessing to somebody outside of church, what are you doing? You're telling them something that you have seen, that you have heard, that you have experienced. Okay? Because it doesn't do you any good, does you absolutely no good to go out and witness to people to come to Christ if you don't know Christ yourself. If you haven't met him yourself, how are you going to introduce him to anybody else? Hey? That's like going up and saying, would you like to meet the governor? Sure, so would I. Can you introduce it? You know? You have to actually know him if you're going to do something like that. So these were witnesses. They'd seen it. Now, there's some commentators that see these witnesses as symbolic of the entire church. There are others that see these witnesses as symbol of the laws and of the law and the prophets. But there's just way, way, way too many specific details about these two to indicate that it's symbolic. It can't be symbolic. It's got to be actually something to physical people on the earth. It can't be symbolic of the whole church. It can't be symbolic of the law or the prophets because there's too much specific detail about it. So we can't do that. All right? So they must be two real physical individuals. Now, some of you might say, well, if this was really, really, really important, then wouldn't John just have identified us? Okay? Wouldn't he have just told us who they were if it was really that important? Okay? Maybe. Okay? Maybe. But the thing is, they are important. They're just not important to us. Who's John writing this to? Eh? Who is John giving this prophecy to? To us, the Christians. Okay? So does it matter the identity of the two witnesses to us as Christians? Hey, why not? We're not going to be here. Doesn't matter to us who they are. So, but it's nice to know. It's nice to have theories about who they are and who they possibly are. Right? Generally, these are identified as basically any two people of the past. One of the most common ones, or the most common contenders in this, there are three common people that they say that the two witnesses are. So it can only be two of them. It can't be all three of them. Three common people that are in the running for it are Elijah, Moses, and Enoch. All right? Well, let's look at which ones it might be then, shall we? That's a good idea. Let's do that. Some believe that it may be two believers that are actually ministering in the spirit of these great men. I mean, after all, John the Baptist had the spirit and the power of Elijah, right? We can often, as Christians, ministers, we can take on the mantle of certain great prophets that were there. Okay? That doesn't mean we are those great prophets. That just means that we are taking on the mantle. We're operating in the power and the spirit of those great people. Just like John was doing in Elijah. Okay? So, some people believe that that's the way. Now, Elijah's pretty much well agreed by everybody that believes that they are two physical people from the past that are coming back. Those who are what we call literalists, those, everybody believes. Almost, it's unanimously just about believed that Elijah is one of those people. Okay? The reason is that his ministry was like one of the two witnesses. You can see that in 2 Kings chapter 1 and James chapter 5, verses 17 and 18. Elijah was carried to heaven. 2 Kings 2:11, he was carried to heaven. He didn't taste death. He was swept away. Remember him and Elisha over there? think I preached on this a few weeks ago. When Elisha was there, Elisha wanted that double portion of what Elijah had. And when Elijah said, okay, if you see me taken up, you'll get it. And Elisha stayed stuck to him like gum to a tennis shoe. He was there. Poor Elijah couldn't make a move without Elisha right there. I always get a big kick out of that when I think about that Elisha was right there on that he'd be walking along and all of a sudden stop and Elisha bump into him. Can you back away just a little bit? Elisha was so close to him, in fact, that he had to be removed from him in order to be taken up. Elisha had to be moved out of the way. Okay? So, he was carried to heaven. He didn't taste death. He never died. Okay? The enemies of Elijah were destroyed by fire. Look at 2 Kings chapter 1. Okay? It is specifically prophesied that Elijah would return before the end of the age. Where does it say that? Malachi 4, 5, and 6. What else comes to mind when you think of Elijah? Not just after he was already taken away. Something that happened in Jesus' time. Something that happened with Jesus. Transfiguration. He was there when Jesus was transfigured. He had a special conference with Jesus at the transfiguration. Okay? Yeah. No, because he didn't return to everybody. He just returned to Jesus. Okay? Now, that leads us to Enoch being the other witness. Okay? Why? Because, basically, Enoch was taken to heaven. We don't know much about Enoch from the Bible, other than a few short verses to where he says he was, and then he was taken away because he walked with God. So we really don't know much about Enoch, just that he was taken to heaven. Right? And he didn't taste death. Now, there are people that see the other witness as Moses. Okay? He didn't do as God says. God. Okay? That's true. He didn't, but he didn't get banned from everything. Yes?
I still can't hear you talking, but I don't see how one of the witnesses could be Moses if Moses was not allowed to enter into the promised land.
Okay.
He broke those tablets.
Okay.
God didn't let him go in there, did he?
He didn't go into the promised land, but that doesn't mean he didn't go to heaven. Okay. He was still allowed. There again, it goes back to you can be forgiven of your sin, but you still have to suffer the consequences of your actions. The consequences of Moses' action for disobeying God, and the reason he didn't go in the promised land, not so much that he broke the tablets, was because he sent spies out, and the spies came back. 10 of the spies says, we can't do it. 2 of the spies said, yes, we can. Okay? And Moses went with the 10 that said we couldn't. So that's why they wandered 40 years in the wilderness. Not because, as many women tend to believe, that Moses wouldn't stop and ask for directions. That's not the reason why they wandered for 40 years in the wilderness. Okay? Yes?
I thought it was Joshua that sent the 12 spies.
Joshua did, but Moses did too. But when they first reached the promised land, he sent the 12 spies out. And remember who came back and said, yes, we can take the land. Joshua and Caleb. Who got to enter the promised land? Joshua and Caleb. Okay? Even though everybody else said, no, we can't do it, and Joshua and Caleb were outvoted, so democracy in action, they wandered around for 40 years. After the end of the 40 years, Joshua and Caleb still got to go in because they were the ones that said, we can do this. We can do it. Okay? They were.
And two, I thought Moses couldn't go into the promised land because he struck the rock instead of speaking.
There are several things: breaking the tablets, striking the rock, and doing several things that added up to it. But mainly, when he went in and said that you're not going to enter the promise. That's when God said, okay, nobody in this generation is going to enter the promised land. You're all going to just wander around until you die off. Once this generation dies off, I'll let the rest of the guys in. Okay? All right. Now, some people think that it was Moses. See, one of the witnesses is Moses. His ministry is like one of the witnesses. Okay? When Moses died, they don't know what happened to the body. The angels took the body of Moses away to bury it, because there was a special purpose for the body of Moses. Right? In Jude 9, we see Jude verse 9. Satan argued for the body of Moses, but he wasn't able to get the body of Moses. So people say, well, there was a special purpose for the body of Moses. All right? The enemies of Moses were destroyed by fire as well. Now, who else was at the transfiguration? Elijah and Moses were at the transfiguration with Jesus. Okay? So, that's why they say that Moses is another one of the witnesses. Right? Personally, in my opinion, and from my studies, and from what I think about it, I think that the two witnesses are going to be Elijah and Enoch. Those are the two. Those are the two that make sense. Okay? Yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Neither of them died a natural death. Moses did die a natural death. And what you're talking about is Hebrews 9:27. Hebrews 9:27, it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment. Okay? So man is only appointed to die once. Now, some people say this is a principle, not a law. All right? Because others have died and been resurrected and then died again. So how can that be if a man is only appointed once to die? So it must be. Huh? He was asleep. Okay. Lazarus was dead. Lazarus and Jairus' daughter, both of them, they were dead. They were dead. They were dead. All right? As a matter of fact, if you remember the story of Lazarus and Jesus coming to save Lazarus, to raise Lazarus from the dead, if you remember that story, he'd been in the grave for 3 days. And when he goes up there and tells them to roll the stone away, Mary and Martha say, oh, wait a minute, Jesus. If we roll that stone away now, he's going to stink bad, all right? He's got a stink on him the bath won't take care of, all right? You're not going to get that. You're not going to be able to get that stink off with Ajax. It's just not going to happen, all right? But the reason, why did Jesus wait that period of time? Jesus knew well in advance. What? He wanted to prove to them that he was actually dead. Okay? He wanted to prove that they were actually dead. All right? So, why is it that Lazarus was able to be raised from the dead? He was there for a specific purpose. For a very specific purpose. Lazarus died for a reason. And that reason was, remember when Jesus went there, he says, I go so that the Son of Man and the God can be glorified through it. So there was a purpose for it. Lazarus was dead, And we talked about this when we talked about soul sleep or present with the Lord. All right? Lazarus was dead, yes. But his spirit, his soul, had not been removed from him and taken to heaven. And there was a purpose for that. It wasn't removed from him and taken to heaven because he was going to rise again. He was going to be resurrected. He was going to come back from the dead. Right? So what would be crueler than to take a soul to heaven and then say, oh, you got to go back, sorry. Yeah. There's a story, Smith Wigglesworth. Anybody heard of Smith Wigglesworth? Smith Wigglesworth was a great Pentecostal minister. He was one of the early Pentecostal ministers. He was one of the greatest ones, a great healer, a very great minister of the Lord. And it said that one time his wife died. And he was so heartbroken, he went in and he raised her from the dead. He said, come back. And she came back and she looked at him and says, why did you do that? Why did you do? Yeah, I was in heaven. Why did you bring me back? And he says, you're right. I'm sorry. I was selfish. And he let her die again. You know. So, I don't know if that's true, but that's just a story that I've been told and I've heard. Okay. So, with all of that, it's not a misinterpretation or a misunderstanding of Hebrews 9:27. It is simply saying that Lazarus, yes, and Jairus' daughter, and all of these were raised from the dead, but they were raised for a purpose. And because there was a purpose, it wasn't a typical way that people die. Right? So, that's the purpose of it. All right. Now, these two witnesses, they've got special protection from God. Yeah, these guys are some pretty bad dudes. They can bring plagues and droughts just by saying it. Hey, control the weather. They can control viruses. They can control all kinds of stuff. That's pretty bad dudes. All right? Yeah, they breathe fire out on people that just have them killed. Now, I know there's some people who have breath that can kill you, but that's not what this is. Okay? But these guys, these are some pretty bad dudes. All right? And it's one of those that if they say it ain't going to rain, you can take that to the bank. This ain't like the weatherman that we have around here that, maybe it'll rain. I don't understand weathermen. How can you only be right half the time and still keep your job? But if you think about it, they're always right. Okay? Well, just think of this. If I say that there's a 50-50 chance of rain tomorrow, all right? If it rains, am I right? If it doesn't rain, am I right? Either way I go, I'm right. I can't be wrong. Okay? Yeah. If it's 90-10, it's still right either way. It's when they come out and say it's a 100% chance of rain. Very rarely do they say that. Usually if they say it's a 100% chance of rain, it's because it's already raining. But they have this power to bring drought and plague to the world. So they've got great power over them. If anybody wants to harm them, they come up to hurt them, they don't have to have a concealed carry permit or anything else. All they got to do is just breathe fire. Fire proceeds from the mouth and devours them. Doesn't just kill them, it devours them. You talk about instantly killed and cremated at the same time. That's pretty good. Okay, pick up his ashes, take him to his family. Save a funeral. We'll do it that way. Okay? So they have similar protection to God. They have protection from God similar to Elijah, what Elijah had in 2 Kings 1. They have the power to shut down heaven. Powers over water. They can tell the waters to turn to blood, and they will. And they can do all of these things. The plagues, the floods, the droughts. They can do this as often as they desire. Yes? The red algae? In this case, I think it'll actually be blood. With these guys, I think it'll actually be, it won't be the red algae. It'll be the real thing. It'll be the real blood. Okay? I don't think it really matters. Yeah, I wouldn't want to drink it. But these guys are not somebody that you want to upset because they can do it whenever they desire. They don't have to have permission from, they don't have to say, hey, God, can I do this? And God says, give it a few days, and then we'll see. No, when they want to do it, they just do it. They have that absolute power right then. God has given that to them. So these guys are pretty powerful. Now, the one thing we got to look at, the two witnesses in this politically correct world, I've heard people say that, well, how do you know it's going to be men? How do you know it's going to be men? How do you know? How do you know they're going to be guys? It could be women. Yeah, Yeah, women would just say, kill them all. Who cares? I don't have to worry about it. Just kill them all. No. Well, it had been a man's world on that. But usually, yeah. Well, when you look at this, and this isn't a real big point, but I'm just saying this for all the politically correct people out there. Anybody else know other languages or anything? A little bit? Y'all know a little bit? You boys know? Y'all know something? Okay. When you speak generalized of people, okay? In other words, a crowd of people, generalized and everything else. When you speak of them, when you speak of this crowd of people, because most other languages have a masculine and feminine, okay? When you speak generally of something like that, what is it in? The masculine or feminine form? Okay. It's in the masculine form. Okay. But when you speak of an individual, if you're saying they, you have somebody there and say they did this, or these two guys, they did this, them, like that. Okay. If they're female, you refer to them in the feminine, right? In the Greek grammar with this, the they, these, them are all in the masculine. Because they are in the masculine, that means that the two witnesses are definitely going to be men. Okay? They're not going to be angels. I've heard people say, well, there's two angels that come down. They're not going to be angels. And we'll see next week why they're not going to be angels. All right? All right. That gets us to the end of the two angels, or the two witnesses. Angels. The two witnesses. I just said there weren't going to be angels. And you said the two angels. Okay? The two witnesses. Yes. Yeah, you can't kill angels. Yeah. Right? And they never die. Yeah. Yeah. Angels don't have a gender, okay, but they can come in any gender that they can appear as any gender. But we're going to see what goes on with that next week. So you have to come in and tune in next week, same bat time, same bat channel. All right. So that's the two witnesses starting out. We've introduced the two witnesses. We've gotten to them now, and now we're going to see some more. Yes. Why does that guy have a red or brown robe when isn't it supposed to be like white? It's a picture. It's a picture. This 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 is not the actual two guys. Okay, we didn't go forward in time, take a picture of them, and come back. This is not the actual two guys. All right, it's just a depiction of them. All right. So that takes care of that. Would you get? All right. Any questions, comments, concerns, amens, oh me's? No? All right.